Today we're going to talk about client readiness to change and the stages which a client can go through when they come to see you, the helping professional. So let's get started. There are 6 stages in terms of readiness to change, and we're going to take a look at what each stage looks like and how you, the helping professional, can respond. So the 6 stages are pre-contemplation, contemplation, preparation, action, maintenance, and termination or relapse. So the first stage that we have is pre-contemplation. This is when the client isn't even aware of the problem or denies the existence of a problem. Some examples of pre-contemplation, in terms of blaming, we've got a person who doesn't really understand that the problem is something that they need to be able to take care of themselves. So they're saying, my husband doesn't even try to make things work. He never wants to communicate and doesn't take me seriously. He's the reason why I drink. So the client's blaming her husband for the problems that she's having, and she doesn't view them as something that she needs to take care of, but rather her husband. Clients can also be unaware. So we have an example here of where a child or a student is sitting with you and they're saying, I have no clue why I'm here. My parents are just making me talk to you. So here, the goal is to try to make the client aware that there is a problem that they can take care of.
I am not in love with her. She was very upset about having to move out, so I didn't tell her we were still married because she'd only get more upset. I comforted her as a friend.
What do you mean, comforted her?
It was nothing, just gave her a hug.
Aha! A classic sign of love, the hug. I saw it.
I don't know what you're talking about.
I'm talking about that which you already know but won't admit. You know, that you love her again. You re-love her.
Look, I do not re-love her.
Can't believe you won't just admit it.
Here we have Ross denying the problem, and the problem is that he's in love with Rachel. So your focus in the pre-contemplation stage is to raise the client's awareness of the problem. You want to give the invitation to change and engender hope for things to be different, but we're not introducing any goals here. The client will be uninterested in a goal if they don't understand the problem. So what can you do in this stage? 1, you can listen empathetically and express your understanding. You can also move the focus to the client. It's important that we're not denying the external problem. We just want to make them think about problems that they can constructively solve themselves. And then we have motivational interviewing, which we're going to get into next. Motivational interviewing is client-centered counseling, particularly useful in the early stages of change, that increases motivation to move from one stage to another by exploring and resolving ambivalence to change. So the facets are rolling with resistance, identifying discrepancies, expressing empathy, and supporting self-efficacy. In rolling with resistance, you're going to assume that the client has valid insights or ideas. So we're going to avoid arguments for change. Rather, you may ask what the client wants to change, if anything at all. In the example of a client with an eating disorder who doesn't think that they have a problem, what you can say is, I understand that you don't view your eating habits as an issue. What do you think would happen if you were to continue these patterns? And then we have identifying discrepancies. This is great for all stages, but really useful for pre-contemplation. We're going to point out inconsistencies between what the client is presenting and what he or she wants. You can say something like, I'm hearing that you think this is a waste of time, but if you don't want to have to come here, what do you think has to happen? Now we're into the contemplation stage. This is when the client recognizes the advantages of changing, but they're also aware of the costs, so they're weighing the pros and cons. Change is possible for the future, but not something that the client can really commit to right now. So here we have another example of friends in the contemplation stage this time, where Ross is seeing his lawyer about getting an annulment.
This was just a drunken mistake, and I need to get it annulled.
I see. Have you considered therapy?
I think just the annulment for today.
We'll need you and Rachel to testify before a judge.
Ooh. There's no way to do this without her, because I kind of already told her it was taken care of.
Of course you did. You can't get an annulment unless you and Rachel are both there.
Uh-huh. What about someone who looks like Rachel? I will think about the therapy.
So this is a little comical way of viewing contemplation, but some other examples that you would see in more real life include, I want to be able to say no, but I'm just too scared and don't think I can do it. I want to be organized, but I don't even know where to start. It seems like it's way too hard. Or if I stop smoking, I'll be much healthier, but it's just too hard and I'll be miserable. So in all of these examples, they can see what's going to be the good outcome, but they can also see the negative effects of making a change. For Ross, the negative effects of change is a third failed marriage, but we do see the positive effects of change is the fact that he shouldn't be married at all. So your focus in the contemplation stage is going to be identifying barriers or challenges to make changes and strengths that will be helpful if they decide to change. You're also going to look for smaller steps to take. And then you're going to state or restate the problem or challenge to have a clear understanding of the problem. We want to make sure that everybody is on the same page. Like we talked about earlier in motivational interviewing, you can express empathy, and this is supporting the client's feelings of ambivalence. You can say, I understand that becoming more organized is important to you, but it seems nearly impossible to do. And you also want to make them aware that this is okay that they feel that way, because pretty much everybody will go through this ambivalent period. We can also do advanced reflecting, which is often paired with identifying patterns and themes. In advanced reflecting, you're identifying values, meanings, and expectations related to the problem. So it seems like you're hurt by his actions. Does that sound accurate? The client isn't explicitly stating that they're hurt, but this is something that you can see and you're gathering based on the information that they've provided. In identifying patterns and themes, patterns are a consistent way of thinking, feeling, or behaving. So in this example, you can say, I notice you seem to get teary-eyed whenever you talk about your friend. To pair that with advanced reflecting, you could say that you notice the pattern and maybe it seems like you're getting hurt based on the way that you're tearing up. Does that sound accurate? So reflecting on that and then presenting that to your client. So now we're getting into the preparation stage. The client is preparing to set goals and is maybe even thinking about steps to achieve their goals. Progress probably has already begun and the goals are being clearly defined at this point. So your focus here is going to be three things: partializing, supporting self-efficacy, and problem identification. Partializing is essentially breaking the problem into smaller, more manageable pieces. The client may choose the problem that's causing them the most pain, or they can choose the thing that is the easiest to manage. You'll have to be aware, though, that the client may not perceive manageable the same way that you see possible.
I want to. I love her so much, but I'm afraid. This is too huge.
You know, okay, you're right. It is huge. So why don't we take it just a little bit at a time? Okay, forget getting married for a sec. Just forget about it. Can you just come home and take a shower?
Well, yeah, but then...
We're just gonna go home and take a shower. Well, that's not scary, right?
Depends on what you mean by we.
Right, yeah. Good old Chandler with the homophobic jokes.
Yeah. So what do you say?
Well, I'll take a shower, but I'm not promising anything.
Okay, that's fine. That's all we're talking about. Okay, come on, let's go home. Hey, who's Mike Smith?
I was sure this was my office.
There you go. You put on a tuxedo. Now, that wasn't so scary, was it?
No.
I'm telling you, just a little bit at a time.
Yeah, okay, well, what's the next little bit?
Getting married. Okay.
So here we have an example of friends again. When Chandler is getting prepared to marry Monica, he's actually kind of been in hiding and he is really stressing out about this marriage. And so Ross is encouraging him to take the problem one step at a time. So next we have supporting self-efficacy. Supporting self-efficacy is when we're supporting the client's belief that they're capable of being successful. You should encourage the clients to acknowledge and believe in themselves, and this is really similar to the skill of identifying the strengths that they have in order to seek empowerment. So in the clip to follow, we kind of see an example of Phoebe and Ross encouraging Chandler to realize that this is something that he can do. Let's take a look.
Right now, no one has a lower opinion of you than I do.
Right.
But I totally believe you can do this.
Okay, but you can do that too, just like you've done everything else.
Yeah, you're right. I can do that.
Yeah.
So we can see that Phoebe really believes in Chandler, and obviously what she says at first, that's not something that we want to tell our clients, but she's showing Chandler that she believes in him, and ultimately the goal is to get Chandler to want to believe in himself, which we do see later. You know, Ross says, you can do this, and Chandler's like, you know what, I can do this. And that's the ultimate goal. We want the client to be able to say that about themselves. And lastly, we have problem identification. Even if you think you have a clear understanding of the problem, it's always important to state your understanding so that everyone's on the same page. You never want to assume that you're thinking what your client is thinking. So a way to do this is saying, I'm hearing that you're having a trouble being vulnerable. It sounds like you haven't been able to open up to your close friends. Basically, you want to confirm with your client, is this the problem that we're having and wanting to solve? So here, what can you do? We can respect the rights of the client, and this is really important. The client should be making his or her own decisions. You don't want to coerce them or influence them into making any particular decision. Everything that they decide to do must be on their own influence. So now we're in the action stage. This is the stage when clients are ready to take specific steps, even with little or no support from you. Maybe they've already started doing things on their own, and here they're ready to set goals. So here are some examples of action. We can have a person with a mood disorder who wants to manage her symptoms. So to take care of this, she's been recording her moods in a log daily and practicing meditation. We have an obese client who wants to lose weight. She started weight loss programs and she's already lost a significant amount of weight. So we're seeing that she's taking steps to do what she's wanting to achieve. Then we've got a smoker who's wanting to quit, using nicotine patch to help control her urges and is slowly weaning herself off of cigarettes. And then we have an example here of Chandler taking action and getting over his commitment issues. So let's take a look at that.
There he is!
What?
Hey! You're not getting away this time, mister, unless you want that ass kicking we talked about.
Ross!
I'm serious. You're not walking out on my sister.
That's right. I'm not.
Then where the hell have you been?
I know about Monica.
You know?
What?
Yeah, I heard you and Rachel talking.
What? What? Talking about what?
You don't know?
No, what? If someone doesn't tell me what's going on right now!
What, you liar?
Monica's pregnant.
Oh my God. Oh my God. And you're not freaking out?
Well, I was. Then I went down to the gift shop because I was out of cigarettes.
Cigarettes?
Take picture, please. So when I was in the gift shop, that's when I saw this. Yeah, you know, and I thought anything that can fit into this can't be scary.
But you obviously didn't see Chucky 3.
But come on, look how cute and small this is. So I got it to give Monica so she'd know I was okay.
Dude.
Way to go, son. I knew you'd find him.
So this clip shows us two things. One, people can take actions in the and take steps in the wrong direction. So we see Chandler, who went to the gift shop originally to buy cigarettes. Well, that's not a healthy behavior that we're taking to replace the ways he's been taking care of his problems, which have been hiding. But we also see that maybe he is moving in the right direction after that, and he comes to this realization when he's in the gift shop. He sees this little outfit for the baby, and then he's thinking, you know what, this is something I can do. So your focus in the action stage is going to be establishing goals. And there are actually two types of goals that we have, MAPS goals and SMART goals, and we're going to go into detail with both of these. So as I mentioned earlier, we've got MAPS goals and SMART goals. MAPS stands for measurable, attainable, positive, and specific, and then SMART stands for specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and time-oriented. So they're both really similar. The only difference is SMART goals contains that aspect of time. For a MAPS goal, we have somebody who, on a broad scheme, wants to do better in school. So to make that measurable, we're going to say, I want to get at least an 80% on my final. Is this attainable? Well, yes. A student who typically gets 70s is going to be able to do that 10% jump for the final exam. It's positive because we don't want to use this negative wording. We want to use words that are a little more encouraging. And then again, we're specific because we want a score of 80% for the final. This isn't some arbitrary thing like I want to do well, because well is not specific. Well could be relative and different for each person. So now with SMART goals, we're going to do something a little bit different. So for this problem, it is something that includes time. The overall goal, though, is cutting the habit of self-harming. To be specific, the goal is to eliminate the behavior, and to make it measurable, we're going to limit the number of times per week to about 3 times or less. This is also attainable for someone who cuts daily. 3 out of 7 days is likely sufficient. Realistically, 3 out of 7 is also good to achieve. Stopping cold turkey is not realistic at all. We also want to be realistic in the sense that the client might not stop at 3 times per week, and we need to stress that this is okay. It's likely that they're going to relapse, and we're going to talk about that in a little bit, but it's also understandable that maybe they're going to do it 4 times or maybe every day, but it's okay. The overall goal is to get them to stop the behavior. And then we want to make this time-oriented like we mentioned earlier. So we stated it in terms of days, and eventually we're going to limit it by weeks, and then months, and then ultimately the behavior is going to be wiped out completely. So what can you do? Don't become frustrated with the client if there's no progress. It's okay if it takes them some time to actually take the steps to make change. We're not going to see change overnight. Don't assume the client's ready. A client may try to please you and take steps before they're actually ready, so it's really important that you're taking the time to assess the level of readiness. So even if they're displaying signs of action and they have before, remember that they can relapse any time. So now we're into the maintenance stage. This is when the old behavior is being maintained, but the pull to go back can be really strong. Behavior must be changed for at least 6 months in order to be considered maintenance. So some examples of maintenance are maybe a person with alcoholism who has been sober for 8 months and is continuing to attend AA meetings. And then we have a student who is failing and has turned in all of their homework for the semester, and they got at least a B on all of their tests. So what is your focus and what can you do in the maintenance stage? You're going to help develop new ways to cope with temptations. It's important to reward day-to-day success and explore how successes in the past have been maintained and use that to empower the client. So we can show them you've been successful in the past and so you can be in the future. So I've been talking about throughout this presentation and in the beginning that there is relapse, and this is a very common stage that goes back to the problematic behavior, and this can occur at any point in time, but it's really common during the maintenance period. So here, Chandler has returned to the behavior of smoking after being free of the behavior for quite some time.
Very bad. Chandler, what are you doing?
Chandler?
Oh my God!
You're smoking again?
Well, actually, yesterday I was smoking again. Today I'm smoking still.
Why would you start again after chewing all that quitting gum?
Look, I'm telling you, this is just like my parents' divorce, which is when I started smoking in the first place.
Weren't you 9?
Yeah? I'm telling you something, that first smoke after nap time.
So we can see with a stressor that is a situation that he's experienced before, he wants to return to his old coping mechanisms, and that is smoking. So in this situation, what is your focus and what can you do? We can make the client aware that relapse is a possibility, and in fact, you should really be stressing this throughout the entire time. Help the client see that when they relapse, they're not a failure, but it's a way that they can be more successful in achieving their goals. It's a positive way to look at things. And then when they do relapse, you're going to want to assess which stage the client has relapsed to so that you can plan intervention accordingly. And then finally, we're into termination, and this is the point where there's no temptation to return to the old behavior and intervention or counsel is no longer needed. So how do we know if the client is ready for termination? Well, they must show that they have 100% self-efficacy, that he or she will not return to the unhealthy behavior, and they'll continue to replace it with the new coping mechanisms that they found. There also must be no temptation or desire to engage in the unhealthy behavior in any and all situations. And then remember that this isn't the end of the process, it's just the point where there's no more temptation. And even after termination, a client can relapse, so it's important to tell them that they are welcome to come back and you should encourage them to come back if they need to. So let's recap what we've talked about. You should be able to assess what stage your client is in, and we talked about 6 stages of change in terms of client readiness. It's important to know which stage they're in so that you can offer the appropriate intervention. You wouldn't want to start the wrong thing too soon or try to drive them in a direction which they're not really going. You can do everything you can to help solve the problem, but really remember that the client can return to you at any time, and they often do. So now you have one more tool for problem solving in your everyday life, and hopefully you can be able to apply this to your clients. Thank you for your time and have a wonderful day.